Ladies and gentlemen, Mark, thanks so much for the introductory words. And let me say that in the next 2 days, you will touch upon all the relevant non-proliferation and disarmament-related issues with the objective to make the international system more safe, more secure, and more stable. This is a crucial discussion at a time when the global nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament architecture is under increased strain caused by what we can only call an increasingly worsening international security environment. I would very much like to reiterate what High Representative Mogherini just outlined. The European Union is united in regarding the NPT as the cornerstone of the global nuclear non-proliferation regime. This is a sentence also reflected in the agreement of the Iran nuclear deal. The NPT is the essential foundation for the pursuit of nuclear disarmament, as you all know, in accordance with Article 6 of the NPT, and an important element in the further development of nuclear energy applications for peaceful purposes. The European Union also believes that a new boost to the entry into force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty should be a priority just a year before the 20th anniversary of the opening up for signature of the treaty. Very much in the same line as High Representative Mogherini, the nuclear deal with Iran is a testimony that multilateral diplomacy is well placed to provide solutions to today's major security challenges. It indeed started in 2003. It took 12 years, but it came to a successful conclusion on 14th July this year in Vienna with the so-called GCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. I think you can fairly call it a historic agreement because it not only provides a solution to the nuclear issue, but it's also a victory. It's a victory for diplomacy and a vindication of the European Union's approach on conflict resolution, which clearly favors diplomacy, a multilateral approach, and political solutions over the recourse to military ones. I would like to focus on 3 issues. I would want to say a word about the negotiation process, as I've been asked to do so. I want to say a word about the implementation challenges, because implementation is ongoing. But I would also like to say a word about the implications of the deal that actually go beyond the nuclear file. Let me start with the first item, the negotiation process. And first of all, maybe the composition of this negotiating group, the so-called E3/EU+3 and Iran. By the way, it's very often referred to as P5+1. We definitely do not like this. This is wrong. P5+1 somehow implies that the European Union is absent. And this is just not the case, because the European Union, as you know, mandated by the Security Council, was not only the facilitator of these talks, but my colleagues, and one of my experts is here, Clement Pollack, we were the pen holders for this agreement. But the format was absolutely important, because the format in a way reflected a wide array of views within the international community, and I think the unity within this group made this process credible and legitimate for our Iranian counterparts, but I think also for other partners, international partners. And let me also say, and I think this is important, the unity within this group, and I'm talking here more about our side, was upheld despite otherwise sometimes difficult bilateral situations among members of the group. And I think this was also quite a successful, or this is also can rightly called be very successful. So in today's world with increasing competing interests, I think it's an excellent example of what we can achieve through cooperation rather than confrontation. The second point I'd like to make is that it was the European Union's High Representative that coordinated and facilitated the whole exercise. It started with Javier Solana, then Cathy Ashton, and finally Federica Mogherini, with always a strong backing from 28 member states. And this is also important. We had 3 countries who had played a very important role, Germany, France, UK, who were part of the group. I would also pay tribute to those 3 countries because they were very much at the beginning of the process. In 2003, it was the UK, France, and Germany that initiated the process, and the 3 countries throughout the process have always promoted the process with very important initiatives. But the EU's role was to make sure that the rest of the EU was kept informed, but also supported the agreement. This was absolutely crucial for the success of this process. But it was also an important role because we ensured, in a way, the go-between between the EU 3+3 and Iran. And I can personally testify, because I've had lots of bilateral meetings with my Iranian negotiators, which in order to help and promote the process, always based on the mandate received from the E3+3. Trust was built in this process and paved the way for a more constructive discussion. So I think it's fair to say that the EU has showed its added value as a mediator, but also as an honest broker in this very complex political and technical negotiation. But the third point I want to make is that this negotiation received strong backing from the rest of the international community. And the reason for it was the commonality of views on the need to ensure the exclusively peaceful nature of the Iranian nuclear program. In order to preserve this, we have made sure throughout negotiations that third states were kept informed, not on the details, but were kept informed in general terms on the state of play of the negotiations. And that's also reflected, by the way, by the fact that negotiations or preparatory meetings actually took place in many different places, including Brussels, Almaty, Muscat, Moscow, Baghdad, Istanbul, New York, Lausanne, Geneva, and Vienna. But I would like to pay a particular tribute to our Austrian hosts, who particularly in the last phase of the process made sure that we had the necessary environment for successful negotiations. Let me say a word on substance as my second point. The EU's approach has been characterized by a double-track approach based on sanctions, but also engagement. The objective has always been to keep the door open for dialogue, while making it clear to Iran that the previous status quo had costs. And I think the need for economic revival became a major political issue in Iran and featured at the heart of the Iranian presidential campaign in 2013, leading to the victory of President Rouhani. The geopolitical environment is important. This deal has been made possible because of the political commitment and the determination of the members of the E3+3, but also Iran. And I really would like to use this opportunity also to commend the seriousness of the Iranian negotiating team. I'm convinced it was the best possible outcome to get the necessary restrictions in place that will give us the necessary assurance of the exclusively peaceful nature of the Iranian nuclear program, but equally important, to start a political process with Iran without which confidence and mutual trust cannot be built. And this also, I think, reminds me of the fact that we have to pay tribute to the leaders of all the countries involved, who at times had to face a rather difficult situation, a lot of opposition inside their own capitals. The Iran deal is a mutually cooperative endeavor which makes it a good deal for all parties and will ultimately remove the concerns of the international community. It's a package combining nuclear restrictions, enhanced transparency and verification measures in turn for a phased lifting of nuclear-related sanctions. I don't want to go into details of the agreement. It's all out on the website, both the agreement and the by 5 annexes. But I would very much like to pay tribute to the IEA because we have had throughout this process a very good constructive cooperation with the IEA, who will play an absolutely key role when it comes to the monitoring of the agreement. And I should also refer to the agreement, the so-called roadmap that was agreed between Iran and the IEA, aimed at resolving all outstanding issues related to a possible military dimension. By 15th of December, the IEA Director General will provide to the IEA Board of Governors his final assessment, and it's foreseen that a Board of Governors resolution will follow up upon this. In addition, the JCPOA contains a number of key provisions to deter future weaponization activities. It explicitly commits Iran not to engage in a range of specific activities, including certain work in uranium and plutonium metallurgy, nuclear explosive modeling, just to give 2 examples. The agreement also foresees a mechanism that will provide the IEA with the necessary access to the requested locations of concern. In addition, measures have been set up to impede attempts to import material and equipment relevant to weaponization, including restrictions on importing sensitive technologies for military end users and a consensus approval procedure for the procurement channel, which is currently being set up to allow nuclear and dual-use items for peaceful purposes. It's a cooperative agreement, and this is why it foresees different tasks for the parties. This was a way to demonstrate their commitment to the process, but it was also important to build trust with the Iranian side. I should say, and this is something I have learned throughout this process, trust actually goes for both sides, and lack of trust was probably the defining factor as far as both sides are concerned. So the need to build trust, which I think has been built, but the continued need to build trust is an absolutely important factor in all this. The members of the E3+3 will carry out, therefore, diverse activities related to the stockpile of uranium, the modernization of the Iraq reactor, and I say a little bit more about this in a moment because this is very important, but also when it comes to the establishment of a procurement channel for the import of sensitive technologies, where the High Representative will continue to play a coordinating role. In exchange for these steps, the E3+3 and the European Union committed to lift all nuclear-related economic and financial sanctions, such as the oil embargo and restrictive measures for financial institutions. This should give a major boost to Iran's economy, and is obviously a critical measure for Iran and for the success of its deal. We have also put in place a dispute resolution mechanism in case there is significant non-performance, which may ultimately lead to a snapback of sanctions within 30 days. But I should also say we should probably not congratulate ourselves too early, as there is still quite a lot to do. We have reached a deal on paper, but we now need to implement it. If you look at the JCPOA, in particular its 5 annexes, you realize the complexity and the large scope of this agreement. The implementation of the agreement over the next 10 to 15 years poses new challenges to all partners. Stumbling blocks will have to be overcome, and a balanced approach will need to be struck with all partners, including those who have most concerns about the deal itself. The first implementation step was the parliamentary review process in the E3+3 countries and Iran, which was quite difficult, probably more difficult than expected for some, but ultimately successful. The commitments foreseen in the agreement have been completed in line with the agreed timelines, and the High Representative and the Iranian Foreign Minister could announce on October 18th that the preparations for implementation entered their official phase now. This is what we call Adoption Day, and this is an important milestone towards the implementation of the agreement. I should also say that the next day already, on the 19th of October, we held the first meeting of the Joint Commission in Vienna again at the level of political directors with the 6 countries and Iran. The Joint Commission is responsible for dispute resolution in implementation of the agreement and for the management of the procurement channel related to the imports by Iran of nuclear-related material. As we had agreed in the GCPOA, the coordinator is the High Representative, and I had the privilege to chair the first meeting on her behalf. We have also established an Iran task force inside European External Action Service in support of this task. Adoption Day is not Implementation Day. As already mentioned, major preparations need to be carried out by Iran regarding its nuclear commitments. It's only after a positive report by the IEA that Implementation Day will be announced. I want to highlight the modernization of the Arak reactor under Iran's leadership as a very important component of the agreement. It's in a way a unique chance to engage in a joint project of cooperation. It was also new territory for all our partners. Detailed discussions are now underway to make it operational. The GCPOA has been a major achievement on the way to resolve international concerns. It's a cooperative solution based on a confidence-building approach. Civil nuclear cooperation is one of the very important confidence-building areas in this respect. And I think you all know that for decades, the EU has been the front runner when it comes to promoting the development of the highest standards of nuclear safety and security worldwide. Cooperation in these areas with Iran will be a very important part of the EU's contribution to the implementation of Annex 3, that's the annex that deals with civil nuclear cooperation. Application of the highest nuclear safety and security standards, I think, is in all our interest. Preparations have also been underway to fulfill the EU's part of the agreement, and this is first and foremost the lifting of all nuclear-related economic and financial sanctions. And I should say that on the 18th of October, the EU already adopted the relevant legal acts to this effect. They will take effect once the IEA has verified the implementation of the nuclear-related measures by Iran. And we have also committed, as the EU, together with our member states, by the way, to issue guidelines for business operators, guidelines to provide clarity and legal certainty for economic operators. And they are particularly destined for our business communities, and we will also reach out to our business communities to provide, as necessary, further explanations. In case of disputes about the full implementation of sanctions relief, there will be a sanctions working group under the GCPOA, again coordinated by the European Union. Some restrictions will remain in force, including on the transfer of proliferation-sensitive goods, arms and ballistic missiles, and against some of the listed persons and entities that will be lifted only in the second phase. So to sum up, implementation is near, but it's not yet in place, and all sides need to show their commitment to what was agreed in the GCPOA. I'm often asked the question if I'm confident that implementation will go according to the books, and I can say that I'm rather confident. And this is because we have actually a very good record when it comes to the implementation of the interim agreement we concluded in November 2014. Allow me to come to my third point, which is a word about the political and security implications that actually go beyond the nuclear file. We believe that the implementation of the Vienna Agreement should be paired with concrete efforts to increase stability and security in the broader Middle East region at bilateral level, regional, but also at international level. Let me start with the bilateral level, where it's very clear that the EU and Iran face common security challenges. And I will only give you one example. Iran suffers directly from the drug trafficking coming from Afghanistan. We suffer from it because it's being further exported to the European Union. Migration and the flow of refugees is a major challenge, and we all know it's the result of the continued crisis in Afghanistan, Syria, but also Iraq. The next months should provide an opportunity to explore how the EU and Iran could work more closely together to address these security challenges. In New York, during the UNGA week, High Representative Mogherini and the Iranian Foreign Minister agreed to launch a high-level dialogue, which will happen at my level with Deputy Foreign Minister level in Iran, in order to explore further areas for future cooperation. And I will actually travel to Tehran at the end of the year to launch the first formal dialogue. At regional level, the EU still very strongly supports the resolution on the Middle East adopted by the 1995 Review Conference. The EU deeply regrets that the Conference on the Establishment of a Middle East Zone free of weapons of mass destruction and their delivery systems has not been convened. I think many of you know that the EU assisted the process by organizing 2 major international seminars on the zone in Brussels in 2011 and 2012, as well as a capacity building workshop in 2013. We are ready to facilitate similar track 2 or track 1.5 dialogues in the future if deemed useful by the states of the region. But I also would like to take this opportunity to appreciate the work that has been done by Ambassador Yavko Layavaya, and particularly to appreciate his unstinting efforts as facilitator. We know how difficult this is, and we have the highest appreciation for all the work done, especially also in the informal Gliom process which he had conducted. Indeed. At international level, the Vienna Agreement opened up a new platform of communication to discuss major crises, bearing in mind the willingness to retain a balanced approach between all our partners in the region. This is the meaning of the recent contacts that took place between the EU and Iran on the Syrian crisis, but also Iran's participation to the Vienna talks 1.5 weeks ago, which gathered around the table for the first time. This is why it was so important, all major stakeholders in the region and international partners since the outbreak of the conflict in 2011. Now, we definitely have not found the political agreement yet, but it was a very important beginning, and it was the beginning of a process to foster a political transition in Syria under the auspices of the United Nations. The EU has been deeply engaged in the crisis, both diplomatically but also concretely, including through a 17 million euro contribution to the joint UN OPCW plan for the destruction of Syria's chemical weapons. In addition, several EU member states made important financial and other contributions to support the plan and gave in-kind assistance for the removal. But not only for the removal, also for the transportation and the destruction of the chemical material. The next Vienna talks, Saturday already, this week Saturday, which will bring again together all the stakeholders, will be critical to make progress on the parameters of a political solution. To conclude, let me say that the Vienna Agreement is a unique and historic agreement based on mutual cooperation, which will ultimately ensure a safer and more stable environment. Its robustness stems from the fact that it covers many aspects of the nuclear fuel cycle, and therefore gives us profound assurances that Iran is not departing from its civilian use. It took us 12 years, many sleepless nights, and lengthy debates over practically each and every word of the agreement, but it was worth it, and as said before, demonstrates what effective multilateralism, which is at the core of the EU's approach, can do to achieve our common non-proliferation and disarmament objectives. I was once told by a Chinese counterpart that China always listens to EU positions on non-proliferation and disarmament, as this is then already the product of negotiations between competing interests among 28 member states. And I know for a fact that it's not only China that is doing that. So I think you should use this unique status, representing 28 member states beyond national interests per se. And this is definitely something I think to bear in mind also for the future. On this happy note, thank you very much for your attention.